Well, in just one day, Biden will deliver his first State of the Union. Whether or not this will be a high-stakes event is up for debate. But it does, however, come at such an interesting time. You see, under the Biden presidency, Americans have been living under the tight grip of state and federal mandates, keeping track of how many times the CDC has strongly recommended wearing a mask, getting rid of it, and then waiting a few weeks before it's reinstated again. It's wishy-washy. It's on and off again, like an ex-boyfriend, except American citizens are the ones paying the tab every single time. Congress just recently dropped their mask mandate ahead of Biden's speech. The physician scheduled to be there saying, quote, "Mask wear is now an individual choice option." Ah, how convenient. Oh, and let's not forget the voluntary vaccine and booster shots. It's not like those were against your free will. That is, unless you don't mind getting fired for your job and then not being able to provide for your family, Biden. Well, Biden's uneventful speech will be accompanied by more temporary fencing around the Capitol building, 700 members of the National Guard, and a studio audience, which are the Democrats, shamelessly clapping and cheering at his minuscule feats. Can't wait. Well, to bring the energy up, we have President Trump's best moments through his SOTU speeches over the years. Roll tape.
Last year, I also pledged that we would work with our allies to extinguish ISIS from the face of the earth. 1 year later, I am proud to report that the coalition to defeat ISIS has liberated very close to 100% of the territory just recently held by these killers in Iraq and in Syria and in other locations as well. Otto's wonderful parents, Fred and Cindy Warmbier, are here with us tonight, along with Otto's brother and sister, Austin and Greta. Please. And Rush, in recognition of all that you have done for our nation, the millions of people a day that you speak to and that you inspire, and all of the incredible work that you have done for charity, I am proud to announce tonight that you will be receiving our country's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Well, joining us now from the Daily Wire, Ian Haworth. Ian, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get to this first. A recent poll by ABC News and the Washington Post showed the leader of our country, Biden, with a 37% approval rating. Another poll from Harvard and Harris reads 62% of voters say that Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if Trump were president. All right, so Ian, I think you get the message here. The people have lost faith in Biden. I suspect those numbers to get worse.
Oh, absolutely. We're only 1 year in. I think that's the really shocking thing, is that time seems to be slowing down to such a rate that it feels like it's been an entire administration. We're a quarter of the way through. So I think there's a lot of bad things that are still going to happen. I'm not surprised the polls are so far down. Honestly, I'm surprised they're as high as they are. I think in the 30s is quite shocking, given that Biden's foreign policy just alone has been terrible. The economy is in the toilet. There's nothing that Biden has done well. And I'm shocked that Americans are still behind him, let alone 37%, 38%. Hopefully that number will continue to drop to be representative of how much of a failure he's been as president.
I know, Ian, he's done something right. I mean, I've seen the best memes of my life on Twitter. Have you not? With all those gaffes? Come on. All right. Anyways, I'm sure.
Great type of memes.
Well, I'm sure Biden, at his speech tomorrow, he's going to highlight a couple of things. Build Back Better, his most recent SCOTUS appointee. But the crisis in Ukraine, it's going to be much more than what we're anticipating. I'm sure he'll need to say a few words about the many challenges at home with inflation and gas prices and the pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just to touch on the situation in Ukraine first, his goal there is going to be to play up the fact that we're all united. That's been his message since really being a major part in creating this problem, is that how united we are, that NATO has never been as united, the West has never been as united. And I think it's almost indicative of the Western selfishness that we're all patting ourselves on the back when the people actually doing the fighting are Ukrainians on the ground and some people who have traveled to Ukraine to actually fight. The West hasn't done anything. Yeah, we've slapped Russia with some sanctions that will likely not do much. And then Biden is doing what he always does, which is applauding himself for turning up to a party late and then claiming that the party is for him. I think it's really awful to see. I think the West should be ashamed of playing a very big part in what is going on in Ukraine. And as many people have said, this would not have happened if Trump was in office. And so the State of the Union address is just going to be an opportunity to play up this non-success that he thinks that his Ukraine policy has been, and to do the same with everything else that he's done wrong. It'll be to play up the fact that the economy is coming back, which could have been done by just taking the foot off the neck of the economy, which the Democrats were doing the entire time. He'll talk about issues like race, like putting the first black female person on the Supreme Court, which is something he promised to do, which is effectively affirmative action. And I also feel quite sorry for Jackson as a candidate, because it's downplaying the fact that she is qualified because he pre-announced the race and gender of the candidate. So I think it's just going to be one very long evening of him making up success story after success story and having the Democrats do a leg exercise of getting up and down and applauding all night.
Yeah, and I'm sure, given what you just said about his SCOTUS appointee, you're going to hear loud claps. Biden's the second coming. He's up here. We're down here. You know how it goes, Ian. So let's go to the war overseas. We're seeing Ukrainian people signing up to defend their lands and their homes. The Russian military, it outnumbers their militia. I mean, how do you see the rest of this going down? What happens if Russia completes their objective? What does this mean for the citizens? Will they lose their homes that they fled? What's going to be the trajectory of this?
Well, the trajectory, if Russia is successful, is that it'll just be annexed as a country and that Ukraine will be reabsorbed back into Russia, which is exactly what Putin wants. I think there are a few different ways to look at this, though. There's some different layers. The first is that Putin is just very aggressive and likes to throw his weight around. I think this is an example of him doing so. He's making up stories about Ukraine being run by neo-Nazis, that NATO is trying to expand into Russian territory. All of this is utter nonsense. But he is really following what he's threatened to do. And I think the fact that the West allowed this to happen, this could have happened under Trump. Like, this isn't the first time Putin has invaded Ukraine. It happened in 2014. And I think it's very telling that he waited an entire administration before doing it again. And so I think in terms of what happens next, a lot of it's going to depend on what people on the ground do in Ukraine. They're certainly putting up a much stronger resistance than anyone could have anticipated. It's very much a different Ukraine than they faced in 2014. But it also depends on what the international community does. They're all applauding each other for doing various sanctions and for pouring pre-purchased vodka down the drain. None of these things really matter when we're still purchasing millions of barrels of oil a year. And so I think we need to be looking ourselves very, very strong and very critically in the mirror and actually deciding what is worth spending our money on. And I don't think funding people like Putin is the way to go. So I think this could go one of two ways. I think it could get kind of dragged down into a really guerrilla battle in the streets of Ukraine, which would be very deadly for both sides and could drag on for a long time. Or Russia could really ramp up their attack and we could see a very, very bloody but very quick war. But either way, the international community has to change because this won't stop until someone stops Putin. He's not going to stop at Ukraine. I could see him going much further. He's already talking about Sweden and Finland for some unknown, bizarre reason. So I think it's time that we as the West wake up and realize that not buying vodka is just not going to cut it this time.
Certainly is not. There has been a ton of bloodshed, as you mentioned. Hopefully we do not want to see more. We want this to come to an end, and we really want Putin to pull back. I don't know what it will take for that to happen, but, Godspeed. Ian, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.